us to her project, which is an International Student Community Center. Her thesis committee was Garth Rockcastle, chair, myself, and Professor Ming Hu. And so it's all yours.
Hi everyone. Thank you for being here today, so early, and and thank you all for understanding my English. And I want to thank my chair, Professor Garth Rockcastle, to get me this throughout the process. And I want to thank my committee members, Professor Brian Kelly and Professor Ming Hu. And also I want to thank my mom and all my friends being here to support me. Thank you. And so my thesis topic is international student community, which is from my own experience, kind of strengthen relationships between international students and local students by defining gathering spaces. So nowadays, more and more students are seek for overseas universities, and they have to study really hard on their work, and then also they have to adapt to local cultures and lifestyles. It's not really easy, and then also I know for local students they have to adapt to international students for their different cultures and different lifestyles. So University of Maryland has a really collective diversity of different cultures. So this just provide us opportunities to build international student communities. So I hope this thesis, international student community, can bridge the gap between international students and locals, and also is supply affordable and comfortable housing for around 200 to 600 students. And then it's also create a more multicultural friendly culture for UMD. So in UMD right now, we have 3,600 international students now in University of Maryland, which are come from over 150 countries. And you can see the numbers is rising each year in here. So it will be more international students later in UMD. And what we have for UMD right now, international students and scholar services. We have international student orientation, which only provide the services for procedure and documents for us, and scholar orientation, which is similar to international students orientation, and international coffee hour. This happens 1 hour a week, which you can just walk in and talk to other people and know new friends, but it only happens 1 hour a week, so it won't good enough. And language partner program is only for some certain majors, not for everyone. And UMD, so the language house in UMD. So this provide a really great example for international student community. This is a living-based learning program. You have to stay here and speak certain languages. So in which way they can learn others' culture and others' lifestyle. So site selection, I kind of look at several sites around the campus, around seven sites, and by analyzing them, I end up choosing 2 sites, which provide more different opportunities. So I called one of them park site, and the other one is urban site. Because of the zoning, the urban site is more around commercial area, and the park site is more quiet and in the woods. So by analyzing both of them, the park site covers 1/3 area of UMD, and the urban site covers 2/3 of UMD. And the park site contains 5 bathrooms to go outside, and then the urban site contains 10. So instead of only choosing one of them, we kind of choose both of them, because when they overlay the center of UMD, and then they covers most area of University of Maryland, and then they contain 12 bathrooms of University of Maryland. So culture analysis, which is the hardest part in my thesis. First, I kind of analyze the 5 biggest students group in UMD, which United States, China, India, and South Korea, and Iran. I analyze like how they build, what their lifestyle is, and how they design their buildings, what kind of material they use. They are so much different. I can imagine how I can design a building like which accommodate all those like differences. And it's even only 5 countries, and I don't know how to design like a building can balance all the countries, cultures and material and design. So I kind of look up again of the culture patterns. It's kind of divided by 3 dimensions. The first, culture complexity, which defined by all those aspects. We already know, like in University of Maryland and even United States, we have really complex culture, tight and loose culture. So tight culture means like most of the people in the group, they are kind of similar to each other. They have a certain norm. So loose culture means like everyone is so different. They don't have like certain norm. So we know here we have loose culture. So the third dimension is individualism and collectivism. So this is like how we can design for both of them, and how we can design here to influence like how people can interact with others. So for collectivistic culture, people kind of create the gathering space in the middle of the community where like people can go through everywhere and then they can interact with others. And like there are few individuals in a group, around 6, like I designed. And then, so in the collectivistic culture, people, they more care each other and they more blend in each other's life. In individualistic culture, like people are live a little bit far away from each other, and the group are getting bigger, and the gathering space is not like necessary in the middle, but it's also required. So they kind of place them in the edge of the community where they can choose to go to or not. So in this thesis design, so it's necessary to design both collectivistic culture living spaces and individualistic living spaces. So by looking at, like we know in architecture major, we are more collectivist cultures. Like here's the place where I met most of my classmates, and I know like local cultures and stuff. And so I kind of look at how building can influence this. So in architecture building, we can see we have kind of like 3-dimensional gathering spaces. The first one is like primary gathering space, which is great space, like where we are right now, and then auditorium, and secondary gathering spaces, like studios, and tertiary gathering spaces, like the desk groups in different studios. But for STEAM buildings, they only have secondary spaces, which is classroom. They just go to the class to take the course, and then they just left. They don't have the time to talk to each other. So like this is how we design, like bubble diagram. So the primary gathering spaces should be events room and classroom. They can like where they can have different events for international students. And the secondary spaces are the lobby from each residential hall where they can keep people here, keep people around, and then they have the chances to talk to each other. So how we design secondary spaces. We know in architecture major why we here, like why we interact with others, why we talk. Because we have same major, we have the same interests, and we have same goals and long-term saving, we can make sure. And in the community, we know we have different majors, and but we living here, which provides the basic like requirement for the collectivistic culture, and how we create same interests and same goal. So there are kind of interests proposed. I just call them like theme, and like by analyzing them, this just provide like the possibilities of them. So probably like for the park, they can propose like art, gardening, and pet. For the urban, they can propose like writing and computer. So this interest could be like changed in the future. So that's like how we design secondary gathering spaces. And for tertiary gathering spaces, where like the kitchen and balcony and living room, design that. So in different units, so the tertiary gathering spaces in different units, like for people dorm and 2 bedroom, 2 bathroom, 4 bedroom, 4 bathroom, and individual studios. So different people then they can choose like different places to live in. For example, like Adam, I don't know who, but business major, love drawing, like studying, different cultures, had to live in a quiet place, just for example. And then like in 20 options, like he can choose one. Probably he would love to live in a park side and start like in an art theme, art interest, and live in a 4 people bedroom. So program level diagrams. So this is like how I design park side. So the park side are more distributed in the plan. This is like where the primary gathering space is. Primary gathering spaces like is a public building center, which can provide like different events room and classrooms. This is secondary gathering spaces, which is a lobby and like studio setup. And then tertiary gathering space, which is kitchen and other living room, which kind of insert in the buildings, like different areas. Like the urban side, they are more distributed in the vertical way. So primary gathering space are in the floor level, and primary gathering spaces, secondary gathering space, and tertiary gathering space are in the upper level, park side and urban side. So in this thesis, I choose park side as an example to design because it has more challenges. You will see like later. If I can design park side like successfully, and it will be fine to design urban side. So existing site is at the south edge of University of Maryland, and it's like a really large area of woods. It has really few car access to the site. It's more pedestrian friendly. So there's a garage just across 2-lane streets. So it would be okay if we don't design parking lot. And student housing and academic buildings. There's also religious buildings along the like decorated in the woods, and these buildings are going to be removed because they want to sell their property, and there's a big mall. So it's just existing natural paths, like how we design this site. So there's a stream going through the site. So I changed the path of the steam, kind of like make the steam exposed to the sun, which creates like more healthy water for the like surrounded nature and the nature woods. So kind of put the buildings like a finger to insert into the woods and enlarge the view to the nature. And building context, which form the edge of the mall. Master plan. So building design, where the primary space is, like you can see events room and classrooms. Secondary gathering spaces, studio setup, and tertiary gathering spaces, like kitchen and living room. Flexible plan. So the bathroom going in the middle of the plan, and the plumbing like go inserted, like not permanent there, but they will be there all the time. And corridor along the bathroom, and we can choose like how we design the rooms. Some rooms they have the direct access to the bathroom, and then they can go out to the corridor. And some bedroom they have to go across the corridor and go to the bathroom. In this way, they can be like changed in the future, like a custom, kind of like what the developer wants. So the typical plan like this, if they want more private rooms, they can design like that way. And if they want more collective rooms, they can design like that way. So concrete structure, shear walls, affinity walls, they're not concrete. And those are like changeable walls. And first floor plan, you can see typical residential plan, but they are going to change in the future. The structure, they just use like concrete flooding, like in here, they see in the ground, and in the like later of the building, they use a pile structure. So how I choose materiality, like I kind of choose really pure color of material to kind of show the beauty of nature, not really influence them, instead of using UMD red brick. So how the louver can influence. So in the winter, the louvers can be opened and they can keep out of the snow, and the sun can have direct sunlight into the building, and they have ventilation. And in the summer, because the sunlight in the short angle, and then they don't really like have direct sunlight in the room. They have indirect sunlight and ventilation, and the tree also cast shadows. In the spring, when the sunlight become longer, and then they can penetrate into the buildings, and then also the tree can cast shadows. And at night, they can close the louver to keep the building warm. So existing site like that, and when we insert the building, and the section we can see like they have all connection from each building. Elevation, you can see the stream is going there, and then like there are walls, and then the pile structure don't really ruin the trees. Public building is in the ground level, and this is like the view along the road. You can't really see the building. It's kind of decorated by all the woods, all the nature, but you can only see like real pure like entrance of each building. Residential entrance, you can only see the entrance. You don't really see the connection between driving experience. You can just drive by and you see some residential buildings and one public center. And this is perspective in the roof. So the roof of connections. Events room, they probably set up a lecture or all the events, and studio setup. This is secondary gathering space. That's all. Thank you.
You mentioned kitchens. Can you point out if there are kitchens or where they might be located?
Yeah. So here, like this is for people dorm, and then they have a kitchen in the middle, and then they go into the kitchen, and then they go to the like dorm. And like for other kitchens, they are inserted like in their own units.
Is it on that point?
Here? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So this is like where the kitchen is, and like this is individual studios, and they have like kitchen here in the middle, and like they are inserted like in this like living room and kitchens there.
I have a question that perhaps you mentioned, but I'd like to make sure that I have clear. I myself have been an international student in 3 countries: Canada, the US, and Texas.
Nice.
And I know very well what you're talking about. That's actually serious.
I know.
And I totally agree with you that one of the things that actually bring together certain diversities is certain common objectives. So I found myself very commonly learning about others in things such as eating together or cooking together.
Yeah.
But I also find commonalities when we have to work together.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it happens that somehow, probably just because of diversity,
Yeah.
you get to work with others in common things. So I totally agree with you to see your own spaces for work, because I do think that architecture is one of the spaces that encourages and enhances that sort of diversity. But why did you choose to work with residential environments rather than other places? Because I would find, for instance, your most recent building, or not the most recent, but one of the I really appreciate, is it called the one that it's for chemical or something, Saint John Edwards or something, or Edwards and John building?
Yeah, it's a teaching learning.
That's right. It's an excellent building that propitiates diversity in a very interesting way. There has been a much stronger emphasis in the informal spaces that are there, spaces that can be used for anything, but basically are used for common purposes.
Yeah.
And to me, that was like a big statement of this university. So how do you choose where to work within this big range of spaces in which this can happen, from the informal but more obvious places where we have to share together tasks such as homework or projects or something, all the way to more intimate spaces. And I'll tell you why, because I think in this big, let's call it transect from the sort of share things to the more private individual room. I think it's easier actually to integrate when you're far from your own individualities. Your room is actually very, very private. And I would expect to actually have to understand others when I'm, for instance, I don't know, praying or sleeping or just tired. But I'm more willing to do it as I move out of that zone. So why did you choose this area?
Okay. So I know the building you talk about is really beautiful, and I kind of I have more international student friends, and they don't really know that building. They can study there. And for most of the STEAM major, they don't have the certain space they can work there, and they really appreciate the way we have. They also say it's really worth it to pay $300 a semester to pay for a studio. You can put all your computer and other stuff there. So I kind of think of a studio setup, they can put their daily stuff there, and then I also created the same interest, same studio, and then where they can share their program and other stuff. I think it's also okay to go out to other gathering spaces like me. I'm not only staying in the studio all the time, but when I want to work with my friends, work with my classmates, I have to stay there. But in the other time, I probably go to other spaces.
My question goes together with something that it's in your project. You also chose a place where there is already certain diversity, which is where all these religious activities happen. There are several chapels there. There's a Jewish congregation and a Catholic congregation. And one of the things that actually I find interesting is that you go into those places and you find yourself inserted in a place that it's diverse by definition. And so you're actually inserting a piece that it's not there, residential, in a place where there is already diversity happening. It's a different kind of activity because it doesn't happen every day. So perhaps you're adding to the thing. But find it interesting by my own reasons that I'm building as I review. But I wanted to know if you actually had a more purposeful intention on that, and I'm not sure yet that you have it. Okay, so we'll see.
I actually think that's a missed opportunity. You already have this sort of spiritual diversity here already, and I would have loved to see that somehow introduced into your program, right? So that you can take what's existing already there and then just heighten it with all these other programmatic spaces that you're adding to the building. I think that would be a stronger proposal because it sort of stays in line with your original premise, right? You're bringing together all these different people from different walks of life, have different cultures, it's a testament of our time, right? We now more than ever need to learn more about each other, right? And so that requires us to, mesh these sort of belief systems and find commonalities, right? And I think your idea is getting to that, but I think that the way it plays out, I think it gets lost. Even the way you talk about these kitchens, which I also think is a great place to kind of share and exchange cultural ideas, and yet I don't see any of that in any of these nicely rendered drawings. So I'm all with you in the beginning and the premise, but then when it comes to the actual execution, it kind of dwindles and gets lost for me. So I would love to see how people from different cultures actually interact with these gathering spaces, right? That's the idea that supports and holds your entire premise together.
First of all, I would like to ask you, what is this building?
Oh, this is a garage.
This is a garage.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful too.
Yeah, it's like an ugly garage, you know that? No, because it's interesting, your approach, and very clear your analysis, the point where you arrive to make distinguish these two areas. You're talking about the park side and the urban side. I really appreciate that. So maybe the next step, before to arrive at your solution, your proposal, could be a little bit given more information about the context. Because the master plan that you propose, I think is missing a little bit some analysis before to arrive at your arrangement. At the same time, I'm very interested, I really love the fact that one of these 4 buildings you spend time and energy for gathering space. Maybe context and master plan can help you to find the best location for your gathering space. For example, if you're talking about a certain moment of develop the mall, no? This is the main access. The main access at the end, you have the opportunity to put there something more public, something more, I don't want to say landmark, but something that is at the end of your path. So maybe, just the position of the gathering space, you have the opportunity, to reinforce this access with something more public at the end, and then it will be, the consequence of your goal at the beginning.
Okay. So,
And just quickly, I think your entire project is you've kind of focused here, but I think this is your project.
so to answer this question, so like I kind of sitting here, like at the edge of the mall, like all days, and then like seeing which is the best location for public building. And when you really see this way, you couldn't see anything. It's because this is really distracting and it's really long. You couldn't have the best view to see that. So the best view is right here. So you can see the public building, and then like you kind of hide the residential hall along the road. And another is the first steps. We kind of design like the building like in this way, and I want to change the road like that. But we just find out there's a like turning ratio of the bus, of the school bus or other stuff. So we couldn't really do that. So the existing is like that. So I kind of make it like a circle and change the path like this.
I'm sure you know the area better than me. No, you have to think about the opportunity to have a gathering space. Also, if you want to consider the 4 building without context, another advice could be gathering space usually work better when you're in the center, when you have same distance from residential to the public. Usually.
Totally
That
agree.
could be another.
Yeah, thank you.
Again, I really appreciate where you started and your initial analysis. Dormitories can be a very rich
building typology because of the social implications of people living away for the first time often, and certainly you've added an important layer to that in terms of the international cultures that would be mixing in this place, and that's why I asked about the kitchen, obviously, but I think there are other things that could come into play. I think there's a tremendous diversity of precedents that, that also provide an interesting resource for you in terms of the different ways of grouping people together in suites versus single rooms, the way that circulation is treated in dormitories in order to facilitate the kind of mixing that I think you're talking about. I think there are some missed opportunities here in the planning. I think you've approached the planning in a way that doesn't really allow us to see your intentions very well, because when you walk in the front door, you see elevators, right? And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
so that's not an invitation to mix, right? It's an invitation to get up and out at your floor. And so in a way, I wish the entries were in the middle,
Okay.
between the bars, right?
Yeah.
So that you could come in, you would have one sense of community for the people that are mixing between the two buildings.
Yeah.
People in the middle would have multiple opportunities to mix. And then you would go to your individual building.
Okay.
So you break it down into different scales of community, right? Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to say that, okay, this is a big university, it's an important site, as was mentioned, but then the sense of community can actually happen at different scales with different programs that could also encourage different types of mixing. So I think somebody alluded to the idea of study spaces versus, or contemplative spaces versus social spaces, right?
Yeah.
And so this kind of lounges that you have there, they're a little ambiguous in terms of who they belong to, especially on the ground floor. Maybe as on the upper floors, it would be more clear who that space is really for.
Yeah.
But where's the space for all the people in that floor to gather that's really their own if you're on the upper floor? I think you have a wonderful opportunity to celebrate an idea about community by putting a space at the end of the building, overlooking the green space, right?
Like at the end of.
Yeah. Because right now you're there's just 4 bedrooms, or in some cases, So again, showing your priorities and really sticking with them. And the other opportunity would be to break up your hallway, right, which is kind of uninterrupted and very narrow and doesn't provide any space for gathering or informal interaction. So perhaps having a space somewhere in the middle of the building or at the end, so that you really pull people toward the main amenity, which in this case is this beautiful natural site, and then that becomes the place where they interact, and then they have another chance to interact, in the space of entry and circulation. And you can imagine that there could be study halls off of the entrance on either side, so that if you're in one building, you could. There's a lot of, I think, ways that you could really do this. There's tremendous precedents. In the Boston area, for instance.
I know Carleton University, they have that, like they have gathering space in the middle of buildings, like kind of in between the hallway. Yeah.
So particularly, I'm sure there are other examples around here, but from my own experience, at MIT, there's wonderful examples of different types of gathering spaces, and then they're all very strategically located. The building that I'm thinking of in particular, has a lounge space for each floor, and then it has a lounge space for all the floors together. That has, and then there's a central corridor that links them all together as a group of larger complex buildings.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment.
Actually, I think all the comments have been made. Sorry. All good comments, but also I just want to compliment you on your analysis and how you got there. And I think that one thing about that is that when you do that, you do reveal a number of things that you do have to tackle. I think for me, all the comments, which I think are definitely appropriate for your study, was the one where you started in the very beginning with the mall, and how do you terminate that mall, and then how your building then fits with that new master plan or urban design plan that you've come up with, and then how does it integrate with what's already there. And it was mentioned the religious buildings is there, but also just the site. You picked that site, and then you didn't take advantage of that full site. Do you get down to the creek or not? Do you? What happens at the lower levels of the buildings? Do you access it? The overlooks that were mentioned. All of those things really, I think, point to ways to engage people in a number of ways that sort of break down the barriers, and nature has a way of doing that. But I just wanted to compliment you on just just tackling such an immense problem, and I think you solved a lot of problems, but you also revealed a number of the things that you need to look at. Some of them are basic, the ones about the building and how you enter the building, how you move through the building, all of those. The in-between, I think you did extremely well. Impressed with that. Just wanted to thank you.
Thank you.
I think you have I don't know how to say it, a sort of confused approach to the idea of the landscape here. And I'm going to be critical. So, first of all, it seems clear that the idea of the relationship of the individual room, to the landscape is very positive. When I get to my room, I get to be in the trees, which is very nice. On the other hand, there's a whole lot of things about how you treated the landscape and the relationship to the campus that I find confusing, at least. So first of all, the aspect of moving the creek bed, moving the creek,
The stream.
the stream.
Yeah, the stream.
So to do that, you would pretty much have to destroy a landscape in order to make one. You'd have to cut down a lot of trees, destroy the tree canopy to move it. And that just seems totally contradictory to the basic idea of wanting to communicate a sense of respect for the landscape. Second thing is, since you put the building on pelote anyway, it would seem you wouldn't need to move the creek if you're going to put the building on pelote.
Yeah.
To float them above what would be that sort of floodplain situation. So I think that's really problematic. The next thing is that the master plan, which I happen to be overly familiar with, makes it really clear that the axis of this wall was intended to be open to the very landscape that you are plugging up with your building. And that if you had consulted the master plan information, I think you would have found that, you know, to be the case. So again, I find that to be really contradictory, that you've honored my personal, individual relationship with the landscape when it's all done, but you're destroying the community relationship with the landscape, which references architecture at the top of the hill, and tries to leave the openness to our rapidly diminishing precious landscape on the bottom open in order to make that deliberate connection. So in any case, I find this, and I say all this in the hopes that not only you'll benefit from it, but the other students that happen to be around might benefit also. It seems like we as architects have a tendency to think that every single axis in the world needs to end on one of our buildings, rather than something that actually transcends them.
Yeah. Thank you. So yeah, I really like natures, and I really want to treat them with the building like really well. And I know there's a really problematic side, so I know there's a lot of challenges there.
I want to make a comment that's probably originated by your feeling about landscape. I think one of the things that this project does well is actually not interrupting that continuity, at least visually. I would have actually worked out your sort of promenade connecting all of them, but the fact that you took a stance in saying, you know, I'm going to do residential, but I'm not going to do a big building, it's actually an interesting idea. And the fact that you fragmented it in several pieces, so you can see through. And you mentioned at the very beginning that the actual view from the street, that one wouldn't be that, but it would be more about trees. And all.
Yeah.
That's right. I think that you're missing communicating that clearly. I think that your intention of having a lot of glass, of breaking down the big building into smaller pieces that actually open towards landscape, it's actually a good idea. And so I don't know what's the plan of the university on doing this here. Many things could happen here.
Yeah.
But in that sense, I think that this could not be so hurtful as it would be, actually placing a building at the end, which is something that would be very tempting to be honest, as an architect. So I do think that you have clarity. You didn't talk anything about roof that seems to be green roofs, right?
Yeah.
But you didn't say anything about it.
Yes.
Think about that.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully you won't ruin the trees a lot.
All right, so I have a question and a couple of comments. So is this residential complex intended only for international students?
No. They're for like all kinds of students who wants to live here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's also for local students who want to like learn different cultures.
Great. So there's been a couple of comments, I think, on the kitchen and the idea of kind of sharing through eating. I think you have these great perspectives up here. I kind of wish one of them was a dining room, and I wonder if you want to create opportunities both for private cooking and dining, but also something that's maybe a little bit more communal. And I think Mr. Adams had some comments about potentially having some communal spaces at the ends of the corridors that might address the landscape, so that might be one of the opportunities. Because I think you've also kind of created this kind of dormitory version of kind of suburban cul-de-sacs, right? So if you think about Jane Jacobs' ideas of kind of short blocks giving inhabitants of the city this kind of diversity of experience by having to go through different routes throughout their days or weeks, as opposed to the same route every day. That maybe you create a little bit more of a network of circulation that is also driven by some programming that kind of, there could be a crossroads where everybody has to go through, and therefore creates opportunities for a lot more you know, kind of interaction, you know, just spontaneously, as well as, you know, creating these opportunities throughout your complex that, you know, allow for people to experience, you know, the entire area as opposed to, you know, just the spaces that are adjacent to Mohawk Lake.
Hi, Jiayu. It's terrific to see sort of the end of this process, and I very much appreciate it. We've talked about the axis and some of the history of that axis and how it's defined, but I think one of the things that I really do appreciate about your strategy, and I think the design bears it out, is permeability. And I'm interested in the architecture of this solution. And in particular, I would call it an incantation. There's a drum beat in your scheme that's defined, and let me just point it out here, sorry guys. But you see sort of the walls in every one of these views.
Yeah.
It's a recurring theme. I can even go over here, and there it is again. And in this very nicely rendered elevation, which is as close as we get to a view from the end of the axis. And as I was sitting here, I was imagining that the trees would cast luminous shadows on these walls. And I just wanted to hear from you a little bit about what your intention is with the architecture. What is it telling us? How is it inviting us into your community?
So I kind of designed this wall with like a really large, like pure white wall. So because like the different buildings, they will have different inches or different things at the end, I hope like these walls can celebrate probably pictures or words, kind of tell the story of the building. So I didn't really render them now, so I just like leave it now.
Yeah, they could be translucent. You could look at a number of different materials for those walls, and
yeah.
you might even project images from the inside on them. It's just the way you rendered them in terms of the architecture of the building, which is very light, and I think inhabits the treescape quite well, but the walls seem to be an invitation for an imprint of the natural environment in the architecture.
Okay, I'm going to bring a little wrap to this and start by indicating I hadn't really known Jiayu until the beginning of thesis. For the 2 semesters that we get to work with our students, we got to know each other quite well. And there's a characteristic about Jiayu that I wanted to use as a way of introduction and a form of resistance to some of the comments here, all right? So bear me out. Jiayu's not atypically, but very deferential. She's very respectful. You can see she absorbed like a sponge all of the comments you offered. But she also has a pretty sharp eye and a pretty clear idea about what she's doing. And it took me a while to figure this out, actually. And she does not engage us in the way in which a lot of students engage us, where you're aware of the resistance, you're aware of the issues behind the scenes. She just absorbs it, takes it in, and then starts to process it. The comments were exceptional, by the way, all of them. But what they lacked was a little bit of her resistance to them. She allowed them to stand, I think, more than I would have if I had been. And so I'm going to pick on a couple of them because I know I've talked to her about them and they're present, and you ought to just know that they're present in her work, in her thought, and in this thesis. Okay. One is the context and understanding the sensitivity of the context. This is one of the most stable residential neighborhoods to the south and swinging around to the west. And this is a very, let's say, contested, it's not really a park, okay? It's actually a series of private ownerships that the university has been troubled about in the master plan, for example. How it comes to the edge of this context, because it controls very little of it, has always been an open question. Of course, there's an open end to them all because they don't own or control any of the property. This thesis has stepped into it and said, what if there was a path forward and the campus could be edged? That was the beginning of the thesis. So we supported that idea to see what would happen. She too, as she mentioned, loves this notion of this sort of park-like preserve, knowing that it's surrounded by individual single-family homes, one of which is owned by our faculty members, the closest one actually. And it was clear to her that the ends of these fingers really should not be social. They should not be the more ruckus, potentially ruckus spaces of the dormitories, that they needed to stay on the inside edges. If there was any hope that this would ever achieve any public stature and shared stature, then it would have to take place in that way. And so we could have offered that up as a kind of commentary. Okay. The other was this issue of these religious institutions. She's very much interested in mixing some secular forms of organization along with the theological. And the idea here was that they too would contribute to an ensemble of institutions and organizational edges that would be a complement to the campus. And I think she's done quite a nice urban strategy with those issues in mind. I also wanted to suggest to my distinguished colleague, Professor Hurt, about the end condition and the presence of the woodland, because I think what she is arguing is that if there is a role for the campus at the edge, it probably would benefit from being considered this way as opposed to just a cliff to a parkland, which again is ambiguously owned and off limits to public access. That by containing at the first floor only the gathering of the public access and introducing the social spaces that support it, and then elevating and projecting the private spaces into this finger of woodland, that might be, in fact, the better way to treat that edge than to leave it as nothing. So I think, Jiayu, I'm going to encourage you to consider the idea of speaking your mind a little more and being confident in where your ideas come from and what they stand for. Not that they will always be right and you will always benefit from an exchange, but I think you will benefit from standing some of your ground a little bit, more confidently. And I learned from you, frankly, the grace of listening completely and absorbing before speaking. So I'm going to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jiayu. Reviewers, we're going to go one bay over.